Raider Nation, we're looking forward to the Chargers, and the best indicator of future success is what we already know. Last week, the Raiders entered Foxborough as underdogs, as they are this week, earned a victory, and showcased several standout performances that I hope continue into Monday Night Football. But the bottom line is this before I get into the Chargers. I'm so happy we began the season with a win. The offseason is such a slog that it's painful to start the season with an L, especially given how much you anticipate the season returning. Last week, the Raiders didn't just book a win. They traveled across the country into East Coast territory, where they usually struggle, and just won, baby. And on top of that, they did it in rainy weather conditions, which suggests that this wasn't a true showing of our full power. Typically, in rainy weather, you assume it's going to be an ugly game, so you want to just win at all costs, and that's what our Raiders did. Imagine how well they can and will play at home indoors in Vegas. I especially like Geno Smith's performance last week, and he's going to need to improve on it this week. It's good to have an actually seasoned veteran quarterback who's accurate, capable of scanning the field, and who's predominantly smart with the ball. At no point during the game against the Patriots did Geno look infantile and lost out there like Minshew in AOC frequently did last year. He started hot with a 23-yard pass to Brock Bowers and a 26-yard touchdown to Trey Tucker. Kind of fell off in the second quarter, but that also falls on the line, who we'll talk about later, but bounced back in the second half in a big way. Not only was he on point himself, finishing the game with 362 passing yards and a 70.6% completion rate, but he managed to keep us alive for the come-from-behind victory. I have a feeling he'll have to do a little more than just manage the game during this upcoming matchup against the Chargers, especially if Justin Herbert manages to go off and make this a shootout. Geno had a promising first showing, which is good because my hope during the offseason was that Geno could be our new Rich Gannon. In other words, a veteran with a chip on his shoulder, a high football IQ, and a commitment to proving his haters and doubters wrong. Let's just hope that Geno can finish the job and win us a Super Bowl if he gets there. But in the short run, let's just hope he can carve up the Chargers defense. It's not as though we don't have the tools and firepower to potentially do it. Overall, it's looking like we finally found us a wily, competent, and most importantly, efficient veteran quarterback. If he can maintain what he did against the Patriots, Geno will prove to be an ideal learning tree for the young pieces of our offense. And obviously time will tell, but let's not overlook the fact that our offense, under the guidance of Geno Smith, put up 20 points against a defensive-minded coach in Mike Vrabel. Again, it's not as though it's an impossibly tall order to do the same against the Chargers. There's kind of a similar team profile between the Patriots and Chargers. Obviously, I would argue that the Chargers are a little more established and a little more talented. Again, our hope and prayer, though, is that Geno can shine even brighter indoors, which he historically does, when we come home to face the Chargers. On the defensive side of things, one star who stood out last week was linebacker Devin White, who made key plays when we needed them, including a run stuff that led to a punt on the first drive, a run stuff for a loss early in the second quarter that led to a missed field goal, a first down saving tackle on the next drive, and another run stuff on the next possession, which ensured a 3-and-out. Do you see the pattern here? Devin White showed playmaking ability, which our Raiders have been sorely lacking for many, many years on the defensive side of the ball. Let's hope that continues, and let's hope that we can get more consistently off the field on third down. Against the Chargers, you're going to have to. Don't give their offense any extra oxygen, or they'll burn you. Last week, safety Isaiah Palamau looked good too, grabbing him an interception. Hopefully, this kicks off a trend of more defensive takeaways, which was another lacking category for the Raiders last season. Even though the interception was the result of an errant throw by Drake May, the fact of the matter is that success begets success. A secondary like ours, with so many young upstart players, needs all the confidence it can get. When corners and safeties see each other nabbing interceptions, it can cause a rising tide lifts all boats situation. Plus, if you go back and watch that interception, it was initially caused by great pressure by our defensive line which really started to step up in the second half of that game. So kudos all around. Defense wins championships, and at least in week one, it looked like our defense was more competent than it's been recently. Overall, our defense overperformed in week one. Unfortunately, they're going to have to overperform again on Monday against the Chargers. Speaking of pressure, last week, Thomas Booker's pressure contributed to Drake May's interception. Thomas Booker was good as well, but most importantly for Raider Nation, our boy Mad Max looked good. Crosby was dominant up front all game, forcing turnovers, recording a sack. Add on Jermaine Pratt playing well and getting a deflection, and you can start to see a lot of potential. With a defensive guru like Pete Carroll at the helm, one has to imagine that this defense will only improve with time. Again, you've got to keep in mind that our D played well in 3 out of 4 quarters as visitors in rainy, sloppy conditions. I'm hoping that they'll clean up their mistakes and really get their act together when they're dry indoors this Monday playing at home against the Chargers. And on a side note, I'm praying that Elandon Roberts fully recovers. Whether he plays or not, I think Carroll suggested he'll play, so we can return to genuine full strength. If we're going to consistently win, we can't do it with our depth getting tested on defense. So prayers up, Raider Nation, and let's pray that this team gets fully healthy between games and stays healthy. And that's not just for players who get injured in a game and aren't playing the next week or two. That also goes for players who are wounded dogs but are still getting themselves out there to play every week. We don't want any wounded dogs. We want dogs, but we want them at full health because we don't want any long-term bigger problems to assets on defense or offense. Back to offense. It's beginning to look like we did well for ourselves picking up Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers. It really shows when analysts and podcasters don't follow college football, because anyone who closely followed Michael Mayer at Notre Dame would know that he's no slouch. In fact, Michael Mayer was oftentimes elite while playing at Notre Dame. In college, his elite level was nationally recognized, and it's largely the reason guys like me believe there's still untapped potential there. So even though it surprised a few Raiders podcasters and media personalities that Michael Mayer came up clutch in Bowers' absence in week one, it was no surprise to me. Our Raiders possibly have, and this is going to be controversial, but I'm just going to say it, possibly have the best tight end room in the NFL, the most well-rounded, at least. The only reason Michael Mayer doesn't receive his flowers is because he's rightfully overshadowed by the generational greatness of Brock Bowers. But now that we have a capable OC in Chip Kelly, watch Michael Mayer become more of a household name. Speaking of Bowers, I'm not that worried there because last week Pete Carroll indicated that Bowers was only kept out of the game as a precaution, and Bowers practiced this Saturday. So, look, now I'm still praying for his full recovery, but you have to understand that Bowers is a beast. He was a beast at Georgia when it came to playing through everything, including injuries, and he'll continue being a beast in the NFL. This man has zero diva in his DNA. But if he can't play, which I think he will, but worst case scenario, if he can't play, I'm confident in Mayer under Carroll's and Chip Kelly's leadership and direction. You got to keep in mind, 3 different regimes for Mayer since he started his NFL career. So now that he finally has a competent coach, you've got to imagine there's still some untapped potential. There's still some gold and then there hills, if you will. So I don't worry about rolling with Mayer if need be, worst case scenario. Speaking of receiving positions, we'll need Jacoby Myers as well as our whole receiving core, Trey Tucker, Dante Thornton, etc., to continue stepping up. Last week, Myers put up 97 receiving yards, Trey Tucker caught a 26-yard touchdown, and Dante Thornton hauled in a long clutch pass at the end of the game. Even Genty got in on the offensive action, knocking in a touchdown last week. These young players need to keep developing and need to keep growing up. This is the most important part. They need to keep growing up fast. This especially goes for Genty, although I give him some grace due to the wet conditions on the field last week. Plus, I imagine our offensive line is going to keep growing and gelling together, thus opening up more lanes for Ashton Genty. But even Genti needs to grow up fast, and especially so against the Chargers, as he can be our X factor in this game. We got a good look at Geno Smith and what he could do last week. It would especially bode well for us if Genti can join the party on that level. A talent like Genti is eventually going to go off and have a put the league on notice performance. I'm not worried about that. But if he can do so against the Chargers under the bright lights of Monday Night Football, not only will it propel the Raiders into top team conversations, but it would also give us a firm lead in the AFC West. Look, I came away from the first game feeling confident that we finally have a solid crew of players managed by genuinely professional coaches. The Raiders of old would have lost that game, but these Raiders didn't lose hope. They didn't lose fight. They came from behind and kept fighting for Pete Carroll. They kept battling for Pete Carroll. And we came out of halftime with adjustments that cleaned up our defense and allowed them to stuff the Patriots. All we need to do is not regress against the Chargers. If we don't regress against the Chargers, if we come out, hit them in the mouth and win, then these Raiders can genuinely push for a winning season and a potential playoff run. But it all comes down to one thing in Monday Night Football: just win, baby.